My name is Elise. I'm 31 years old. And the most painful phone call of my life came on a gray Thursday in February. Not because of what was said, but because of what my mother couldn't bring herself to say first. She called me at work, which she almost never did. I was at my desk in Toronto, halfway through a stack of corporate tax files, when her number lit up my screen. Before I could even say hello, I could hear her breathing. That particular kind of breathing where someone is trying very hard not to completely fall apart. "The CRA is at your sister's house," she finally said. "They came this morning with a warrant. They're taking the computers, the business records, everything." I didn't say anything for a moment. "What did she do?" I asked. She made a sound, half sob, half something sharper. "I was hoping you could tell me, like somehow I had caused this." I hadn't. I hadn't touched a single file belonging to my sister, or my parents in over 3 years. But that's the thing about being the responsible one in a family like mine. When something goes wrong, they still find a way to look at you. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened last February, you have to understand what my family looked like for the 20 years before it. I grew up in Sudbury, Ontario. My father built a small renovation company from nothing. Residential work, mostly kitchens and bathrooms, the kind of steady work that kept us comfortable but never extravagant. My mother managed the books from home, and my sister, who is 4 years older than me, was the daughter they talked about at dinner. I want to be clear, my sister wasn't cruel to me when we were kids. She was just the one who got everything, without asking for it. When she turned 16, my parents bought her a used car. When I turned 16, my mother said the insurance would be too expensive and left it at that. When my sister decided she didn't want to go to university and came home to work for my father instead, my parents celebrated. When I told them I'd been accepted to the business program at Laurentian, my father nodded and said he hoped I knew what I was getting myself into. The message was never subtle. My sister had stayed, so my sister mattered. There's a specific memory I keep coming back to. The June I earned my CPA designation. I was 24 years old and I had worked myself half to death to get there. Full course load, 2 part-time jobs, a Canada student loan that I was already quietly terrified about. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. My mother said the drive from Sudbury to Toronto was too long, and that my father couldn't leave the job site that week. My sister posted a video that same weekend from a concert downtown, laughing with friends, a drink in her hand. I framed my designation certificate in my apartment and ordered myself a pizza. That was the whole celebration. If any of that sounds familiar to you, if you've ever been the one who built something on your own while someone else got handed theirs, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. I moved to Toronto at 25 and joined a mid-sized accounting firm. I was good at my job. I paid down my student debt on schedule. I built up my TFSA. I started figuring out what it felt like to make decisions for myself. I called home every Sunday. I sent cards for birthdays and holidays. I flew back for Christmas when I could afford the flight. And every phone call started the same way. My mother would ask about my sister before she asked about me. Not once or twice, every single time. What was my sister doing with the business? Had I talked to my sister lately? Did I know my sister was thinking about expanding into commercial work? Then, and how are you, Elise? Almost as an afterthought. I kept showing up anyway. I told myself that's what family did. 2 years before everything fell apart, my mother called me in a quiet panic about the business taxes. "Your father and I are so behind," she said. "We don't understand any of it anymore. Can you come home and look at the books? Just for a weekend?" I took a Friday off work, bought my own train ticket, and spent 2 days at my parents' kitchen table, going through 4 years of financial records. That was when I found it. A pattern of large cash withdrawals from the business account, irregular enough to stand out, totaling somewhere around $80,000. The descriptions were vague. Some had no description at all, just an amount and a date, written in my sister's handwriting. I found my mother in the garden. "I need to ask you something," I said. "There are withdrawals here I can't account for. If the CRA ever audits you, they're going to want documentation." Her face went tight immediately. "That's business, Elise. It doesn't concern you. You asked me to look at the books. I'm looking at them. This is a real liability." My sister appeared at the back door. She'd been inside the whole time. "Are you going through our records?" she said. "Mom asked me to. You're a guest here. You don't get to audit us." I kept my voice level. "I'm trying to protect you. If there's income that wasn't reported, or expenses that can't be documented." "We've run this business for 15 years, my sister said. "We know exactly what we're doing." My mother put her hand on my arm. "You mean well, sweetheart. But you always do this. You find something to worry about. Everything is fine." I finished my tea, packed my bag, and took the early train back to Toronto. I didn't bring it up again. 18 months later, I got an email with the subject line, "Family meeting, please attend." It was from a lawyer named Mr. Sinclair, requesting my presence the following Thursday at his office in Sudbury to discuss estate planning matters. Estate planning? My parents were 61 and 58. My father was healthy. My mother had just started hot yoga twice a week. I texted my sister. She left me on read for 4 hours, then replied, "Just come." I called my mother that evening. What is this about? I asked. Just some paperwork, she said. We need to sort out a few things while we're both still sharp. Can you be there? Is something wrong? Thursday at 11, Elise. Don't be late. She hung up before I could press further. On the train up, I let myself think about my grandmother. She had passed away 3 years earlier, after a long illness she never complained about once. She had been the only person in my family who treated me and my sister exactly the same. At the funeral, I remembered overhearing something. A brief exchange between her estate lawyer and my father, about a trust she had set up with specific instructions for her granddaughters. I hadn't asked about it afterward. I was too hollowed out by grief, and I assumed my parents would handle it properly. Maybe, I thought, this meeting was finally about that. Maybe they were going to divide things fairly. I should have known. Mr. Sinclair's office was a modest suite above a dry cleaner on Notre Dame Avenue. When I arrived 11 minutes early, I could already see through the frosted glass. My parents and my sister seated at the conference table, laughing at something, coffees in hand. A neat row of folders sat in front of each of them. There was no folder at the empty chair. I pushed open the door, 3 heads turned. Elise, my father said, glad you made it. Not good to see you, not we're happy you came, just glad you made it. I sat down at the end of the table, my coat still on. Mr. Sinclair cleared his throat and began reading from the document in front of him. The family residence, currently valued at approximately $860,000, will transfer to my sister's name upon my parents' retirement from the property. My stomach dropped. The renovation business, including all equipment, client contracts, and operating accounts, will also transfer entirely to my sister. I looked at my father. He was studying the table. The family trust account, currently holding approximately $290,000, will be placed under my sister's sole management and discretion. I waited. Mr. Sinclair turned the page. For Elise, no designated assets at this time. The silence in that room was its own kind of sound. I'm sorry, I said. Can you say that again? My mother spoke before Mr. Sinclair could respond. We discussed this carefully, Elise, as a family. This is what makes sense for everyone. I wasn't part of that discussion. Your sister has been here, my father said quietly. She built something with us. And I left. Is that what this is? Because I went to school? Because I wanted a career? You made your choices, my mother said. Your sister made hers. I looked at my sister. She was staring at her coffee lid, very deliberately not meeting my eyes. Do you have anything to say? I asked her. A pause. I think Mom and Dad made their decision. I stood up, picked up my bag, and before I walked out, I stopped at the door. One question, I said. My grandmother set up a trust for both of us, equally. I remember hearing that at the funeral. What happened to my half? The room went very still. My mother's jaw tightened. That money was used for family expenses, the business expansion, the roof replacement, things that benefited everyone, including you. I nodded slowly, including me. And I walked out. If you've ever sat in a room where your own family looked through you, like you were furniture they decided not to keep, you know exactly what the drive to the train station felt like that afternoon. You don't cry. You just go very quiet inside. That night, I opened my laptop and searched through old emails until I found one from my grandmother's estate lawyer, sent shortly after her funeral. I'd barely looked at it at the time. I opened the attachment, her actual will, all 15 pages of it, and scrolled until I found the section on the trust. The language was clear. A trust valued at $320,000, to be divided equally between her 2 granddaughters, $160,000 each, to be distributed no later than 90 days after the date of death. That had been 3 years ago. I had never received a check, never received a letter, never received a phone call. I printed the document, put it in a folder, and sat in my dark kitchen for a long time. If you've ever discovered that someone you trusted had quietly taken something that belonged to you, you know that the feeling isn't anger, at least not at first. It's something duller and heavier, a kind of collapse. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found out the truth about something your family had been hiding? Just type yes if you have. I'll reply to as many as I can. 6 weeks after the meeting, my sister called me for the first time since I'd walked out of Mr. Sinclair's office. She needed money. The business account is tight right now, she said. We have a big job starting in March, and the materials are due up front. Could you lend me $20,000? You have a trust account with almost $300,000 in it. It's tied up. Tied up how? She paused. Investments, they're not liquid right now. What kind of investments? It doesn't matter. Can you help or not? I don't have $20,000 sitting around, I said, which was true. I told her I was sorry, and she told me I'd always been selfish. I hung up without raising my voice. Something about the way she deflected every question stayed with me for days. Not liquid, tied up. I kept thinking about the $80,000 in irregular withdrawals I'd found 2 years earlier. The ones she'd told me weren't my concern. Then, 4 months after that meeting, I got a call from a woman named Ms. Fontaine. She introduced herself as a legal representative, conducting a compliance review on behalf of my grandmother's estate, apparently triggered by a flag in the original trust documentation that had gone unresolved. Ms. Fontaine asked me, very calmly, to confirm whether I had received the $160,000 designated to me under my grandmother's will. My hands went cold. No, I said, I never received anything. A long pause. Then, according to our records, the trust funds were transferred to your father's account as designated trustee, with explicit instructions to distribute equally to both beneficiaries within 90 days. That was 3 years ago. Can you confirm you received nothing at all? Not a single dollar. She said she would need to contact my parents, and that I should not discuss the matter with them in the meantime. She called back 5 days later. Her voice was more careful this time. I've confirmed the discrepancy, she said. Your portion was never distributed, and while reviewing the records, I've also identified some unusual financial activity in the accounts that were later transferred to your sister. Significant withdrawals, transfers to personal accounts with no corresponding business documentation. I've referred this to the Canada Revenue Agency. I want you to know, Elise, that you are not implicated in any of this, but I'd advise you to document everything carefully going forward. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat very still for a long moment. I hadn't asked for any of this. I hadn't wanted a war. I hadn't gone looking for ammunition. I had simply told the truth when someone asked me a direct question. Sometimes the truth does its own work. Are you still with me? Then I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to decide whether to tell the truth, knowing it would upend everything? Leave a comment below, because what happened next changed everything. The call came on that Thursday in February, 4 months later. By the time I picked up, my mother had been trying to reach me for over an hour. I had 43 missed calls. The last text was from my sister. CRA is here, call me. I called my mother back. She was barely coherent. They came this morning, she kept saying. They have a warrant. They took the computers, the files. They're asking about the business accounts. They're asking about the trust. Elise, what did your sister do with it? I don't know, I said. I never received any of it, you know that. She says you reported her. I didn't report anyone. Miss Fontaine contacted me. I answered her questions honestly. That's all. My mother started to say something else. I ended the call. I checked the news 20 minutes later. A brief item had gone up on a local outlet. CR audit flags Sudbury renovation business over alleged tax fraud. The article described unreported cash income, personal expenses routed through the business account, and the inappropriate withdrawal of funds from a deceased estate. Totaling, the article said, in excess of $200,000. The trust had held $320,000. My sister had managed it for 3 years. Miss Fontaine called that afternoon to confirm I was fully cleared. The CRA had already verified that I had received nothing. My name was not in any of the documentation under review. That evening, my sister called. Her voice was flat and exhausted in a way I had never heard from her before. She told me about a man she'd met at a networking event. Someone who had presented himself as a financial advisor, with a polished website and printed brochures and references she hadn't verified. He had convinced her to move a significant portion of the trust into a private investment fund. She had wired the money in 3 transfers. It was gone, all of it. She'd been using business account funds to cover the shortfall ever since, filing the withdrawals as business expenses, hoping to recoup the investment before anyone noticed. You moved trust money into an unregistered fund without doing any due diligence? I said. He seemed legitimate. He had everything. The documents, the projections. That money wasn't yours to risk, I said quietly. Half of it was mine. I was going to pay you back once it doubled, she said. I was going to give you more than your share. I thought I was doing something good for the family. I know, I said, I believe you, but that doesn't change what happened. My father called the next morning. He wanted me to write a character reference for my sister to submit to the CRA. He said it might help with the outcome. I reminded him gently that the irregularities in the business books had been there 3 years ago, when I'd come up to help with the taxes, that I had told them both something was wrong, that they had asked me to stop worrying. He didn't respond to that. I'm sorry this is happening, I told him. I genuinely am, but I can't be involved in the investigation, and I won't be. He hung up. The formal determination came 6 weeks later. My sister had entered into a compliance agreement with the CRA, admitting to the unreported income and the misuse of the estate funds. She was required to repay the outstanding tax liability, approximately $90,000, plus penalties and interest. The business was dissolved to cover the costs. The family home, which had been transferred to her name, was listed for sale. My mother texted me when the sale was confirmed. She wrote, I hope you're satisfied. Not I'm sorry, not we were wrong, just that. I read it twice, set my phone down, and made myself a cup of tea. 3 weeks later, Miss Fontaine called again. She told me the court had approved the redistribution of my grandmother's estate, in accordance with the original will. My portion, $160,000, had been located and preserved during the investigation. It arrived in my account on a Monday in April. I stared at the number for a long time. I waited to feel something dramatic, relief maybe, or vindication. Instead, I just felt quiet. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone. I sat at my kitchen table with the morning light coming in through the window, and I thought about my grandmother. About the way she used to tell me, when I was small, that I had a good head on my shoulders and that it would take me far. She had been right. She had also been the only one in my family who ever said it out loud. I used the money carefully. First, I paid off the remainder of my Canada student loan, $41,000, gone in a single transfer. For the first time since I was 22 years old, I didn't owe anyone anything. Then I put the down payment on a one-bedroom condo in East York, a place that was mine, that no one could reassign or redirect or hand to someone else while I wasn't looking. I set aside $30,000 in a new TFSA, earmarked for a bursary I was establishing at Laurentian, in my grandmother's name, for first-generation students who, like me, were figuring it out without a safety net. The rest went into long-term investments, boring, documented, fully CRA-compliant investments. I didn't buy anything extravagant. I didn't make any announcements. I just lived my life in the new, slightly roomier shape it had taken. My cousin Becca reached out a few weeks later. She wrote, "I've always known things weren't fair for you. I'm really glad you got what your grandmother meant for you to have." I cried reading that text in the parking lot of a grocery store, which was not my most composed moment, but it was the first time someone in my family had acknowledged, plainly and without qualification, what I had lived through. A colleague at work, someone I'd been close with for a few years, sent me a message too. She wrote, "I don't know all the details, but I know you've always handled everything on your own. That takes more than people give you credit for." That one took me a while to read without my voice going strange. People say that family comes first. That blood is thicker than whatever disagreement you're currently having. I used to believe that too. I spent years believing that if I just kept showing up, kept calling, kept being patient and reasonable and present, eventually my family would show up for me in return. But here's what I've learned. Some families have already decided what role you play, and none of their stories have room for you, to be both the one who left and built something, and the one who deserved to belong. They will keep those two things separate for as long as you let them. Leaving isn't abandoning, building your own life isn't a betrayal, and being the one who got less, for years for no reason except that you weren't the favorite, that was never your fault. It was never mine. I didn't report my sister. I didn't sabotage anyone. I answered one question honestly, and everything else unfolded on its own, because that's what choices do. They have weight. My sister's choices had consequences. My parents' choices had consequences. And my choice, to keep telling the truth, even when it was easier not to, had consequences too, the kind I can live with. My sister hasn't contacted me since the settlement. My mother sends occasional texts, always about something small and deliberately neutral. My father hasn't called at all. An email arrived last month from my sister. No subject line. I looked at it for a long time, then I moved it into a folder and told myself I'd decide what to do with it later. Maybe I will read it, maybe it says she's sorry, maybe it doesn't. But right now, I live in a condo that's mine, in a city I chose, doing work I'm good at. I have friends who check in on me. I have mornings where I make coffee and stand at the window and feel, honestly and unremarkably, okay. That is not a small thing. For a long time, okay felt very far away. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's that you don't have to earn your place in your own story. You don't have to keep proving yourself to people who have already decided not to see you. You can simply, and this took me years to understand, stop. Stop making yourself smaller. Stop explaining yourself to people who will use your explanations against you. Stop waiting for the apology that probably isn't coming. Build something that's yours. Protect it. And if the people who were supposed to be in your corner never quite make it there, that's grief. But it's also, eventually, freedom. I'm still building. I'm still learning what it means to just be okay. But I'm doing it in my own home, with my grandmother's name on a bursary fund, and not a single dollar of debt to anyone in my family. I think she'd be proud of that. If this story meant something to you, I want to know. Leave a comment which part hit you the hardest. And if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who didn't choose you first, you are not alone. Thank you for being here.